Please move on.
Hi everybody, I'm Fabio Bucciarelli and I've been working as photojournalist for the last 10 years. I've been covering mostly in the last decade conflict and humanitarian consequences of wars in North Africa, in Middle East, and recently before COVID-19, I've been start working also in Central and South America, including Chile, Brazil, Mexico. And today I'm gonna talk a bit about my last work on COVID-19. It's the story that it's now in Coimbra, as Nuno said before, exhibited in Estação Imagine. And if any of you have question or want to know that I talk about one issue, another issue more deeply, don't hesitate to ask. I received a couple of questions from people that later I'll try to answer also. Is happen most of the people working in journalism, photojournalism, in March 2020. Before March, basically, it was February 2020 when COVID-19 started arriving in Europe. Italy was the epicenter. And all my plan, exhibition, assignment, I remember that I had an assignment. I had to go to Africa for an assignment, but when COVID-19 started, all the plans changed. And I remember spending a couple of weeks in Italy, trying to understand how to work in this story. Italy was the epicenter of the story, the first Western country where the spreading started to increase every day, and the number of deaths also were increasing. And the epicenter was in Bergamo and all the area. It was around a couple of hours driving from where I'm based in Turin. So I spent a couple of weeks trying to understand what kind of approach, what kind of images for describe the story. And I remember the time that most of the images that were published in paper, magazine, or show with notes in television were about empty street, empty spaces, clean water in Venice, and people walking in the street with face masks. And on my side, there were something that were missing at that time. I mean, the human side of the story. COVID-19, it's a virus that touched directly the life and the death of the people. So I thought how to get in touch with the people and how to describe photography and visually the fight against this virus, the resilience of the families. So I got in contact with the Red Cross of a small village near Bergamo called Alzano Lombardo. And I explained them my idea about the story and about to work on COVID-19. So on their side, they were happy to help me in the logistics aspects of the story, and they were agreed to let them follow with my car when they were working in the house of the suspected patients. So this means that I went to the village, to Alzano Lombardo, and the first day I went to the headquarters of the Red Cross, and we spent time to work on the protocol about the safety measures. We were in 15th of March. So at the time, we basically, as humanity, didn't know a lot about COVID-19, about COVID-19 was spreading. So the measure to protect myself, to protect the people around me, was a crucial point of this story. And when I said measure, I'm talking about the full suite, double gloves, mask, and goggle. And also how to put it on and put it out. I mean, how to wear the mask, how to put out the suite once you get out from the possible infected places. So after all of this, I've been start working, and I spent the first times 2 weeks working on this story. I was in assignment for the Times, and the story was, yes, I said before, about showing the effects of on the people of COVID-19 and showing the human side of the story and how their family were fighting against all of this. So for the first week, I've been following the Red Cross, entering the houses, and this was another important part of the story. How, as a photographer, you can enter in this kind of environment, of places with this empathy and closeness with the people. So when the Red Cross was entering the house, first of all, they were announcing my presence, and then I start talking with the families to explain the family the reason why I was there. And I can say that most of the family say accept, they understand perfectly the importance of showing this side of the story. As I said before, Italy was the first epicenter, and after that, the virus have been spreading all over the Europe and all over the Western country and more. And there were the idea that some images can help people to be more consciousness about the virus, to understand how the virus can be, how danger can be the virus, to react. And if we are lucky, we can have a collective reaction. So this is from my point of view, the meaning of the photojournalism. Try to inform the people about what is going on, to help the people to have information. And when the people have information about what is going on, have more tools to react. So after a week covering the story and also entering in the hospital of Bergamo and other places around, and also attended a private funeral. During that weeks, the hospital were saturated. Saturated, I mean there were patients never placed in the hospital. Not only the room, but also in the corridors. And yeah, I'm gonna show some picture. I think that can be a good idea. Sharing the screen, I've been talking about hospital. That was the situation where the COVID-19 patients were under observation. There were no spaces in the room, so this was the way the patients were treated at the time. And this was also a big question for the people, for example, for the people that called the Red Cross, and after they have decided to go or not to go to the hospital. And several cases, the families of the patient decided to not send their family member to the hospital because the hospital were saturated. Nobody knows where they can go, probably far from the place they were living. And also, once the patient went to the hospital, there was no way for the people to see them, to go to see them. This was also very a touchful point of the story. I consider the COVID-19 the virus of loneliness because it separated family. And when the family and the patient went to the hospital, in some cases, there were no chance anymore for the family members to see them again. In this image, we can see Teresina. Teresina is the woman in the middle. They were called the Red Cross because it was not feeling well and were suspected at the time to have contracted COVID-19. So there were the thing where there were not at the time oxygen to help Maddalena to breathe. So the family decided to send Maddalena to the hospital. Maddalena went to the hospital, and this was the last time the Chins and the family saw their mother. Another very important story point for the story on my side was the time I've been working on this story. I started, as I said before, working in mid of March 2020, but after the first story had been published, I keep working and going to Bergamo all the 2020, and also a couple of months ago I've been there. This helped me to get into the story and to develop the empathy, the relation with the family. For example, I've been to Maddalena's house several times. Now with Cinzia, with Lena, we spent a lot of time together. I've been following also the story of Giovanni. Giovanni is the father of Cinzia and Monia, and the husband of Lena, that he also died a year later, not for COVID, but for cancer. So I think that in photojournalism, it's very important the time that you give to the story to grow. And also thanks to the New York Times that helped me working on this story for a lot of time. And this also that big difference between working for a big newspaper or working for a small commission that can be easily an Italian paper or magazine. The time that you can stay in the story. And this help you to get more deep into the story, to get better images, closer images. This was also the last goodbye. Antonio Mato went to the hospital because he'd been suspected to being infected by COVID-19. In this image, we can see his son to say him goodbye because, as I said before, once the patient went to the hospital, was not allowed for the family member also to visit him or to visit her. As I mentioned before, I also attend a private funeral. During that weeks, Italy was under lockdown and funeral was not allowed. The government not allowed to let the people gather and also in cemetery for funerals. And in Alzano Lombardo, I covered this private funeral where there are two family members mourning the death of Teresina. And this was, for example, a case that Teresina has the symptoms of being infected by COVID, but Teresina didn't go to the hospital. So Teresina was not counted as COVID death, but for their family, Teresina died for COVID. So let's imagine how many people did not go to the hospital because the hospital were saturated and died at home. And they were not, most of them considered died due to COVID. So this is only to imagine the big number of people that have been infected and died during the days. After the story where was published, I keep working on COVID-19, covering also the second wave, always for the New York Times, and I keep working in the same places, in the same areas that I've started working in March. A very important point that helped me to get in contact directly with the people was the fact that working in Italy, I did not need a fixer. I mean, the people between you and your subject and the people that you meet. A fixer help you to translate, and knowing Italian, I didn't need a fixer. This helped me to get more close to the people and to talk directly to the people. And this was very important, especially for the first weeks of March, because talking directly to the people gave me the chance to explain them and to talk about COVID-19 with the family to understand better their feeling. And this knowing the culture of Italy helped me to understand it better. A lot of people recently asked me about is COVID a war? After been documenting conflict for the last decade, what can I say is that COVID is a pandemic, and it's important that we use also the right word to describe what is going on. A war is a place that most of the time people have not house to stay because has been bombed. It's difficult to walk around because there are snipers. So it's not a war, it's a pandemic. And the similarity, if we can find a similarity, are the humans and the suffering that the people were living in Italy as they live in conflict zones. But I think it's still important to consider conflict as a conflict and COVID-19 as epidemic and pandemic. If some of you have some question, Nuno, if you want to say something.
Okay. For now, we don't have any questions. If anybody wants to ask a question or raise hand.
So I received a few questions. Let me check it out. They ask me what is demanded to work in photojournalism. So I think it's important to there are several skills that are important on my side. And one of the skills is to try to feel the people, to be interested in what the people have to say and try to get closer to the people. It's also important, this is more or less important for everything, not for being photojournalist. To be photojournalist, it's also important to have the power to stand up when you fall down, and to keep trusting your photography. So this is, I think, one of the most important skill, more than technician and technical and digital stuff. And it's also important to try to edit a story, because editing, it's a very important point of the story. So how you edit a story makes you the photographer you are, more than the picture you get. Because let's imagine to get 1,000 picture and get the wrong picture, the wrong 15 picture. You are a not very good photographer. But if you get the right one, probably you are a good one. So editing, it's also very important skill for being a photojournalist, and try to understand immediately the images that can work if you work for editorial with newspaper or magazine, and if you're working on a longer and project, other kind of images. How you feel about photography during the last year? They ask me. For me, it was important year, a year that I've been working a lot, most of the time on assignment, and this was something that I'm proud to have been covered, because it's something that also happened not only in Italy but worldwide, and in Italy was the first epicenter, so it was important on my side to be involved in this story and to try to apport important images to help our information and consciousness. No.
Yes, you saw the questions on Q&A? No,
Uh,
no.
okay, yes.
Okay.
What's harder emotionally to be working in your country during this time of suffering? Emotionally, I mean, emotionally was not basically different from the suffering of other people when I was covering conflict or refugee crisis. So emotionally was the same suffering on my side. What it changed was personally. I mean, this was something that touched my family. Everything was good and everything was nice. The idea to do not see my mother, for example, for several months, for the risk to transmit COVID-19, this was something also personal. But talking about suffering, I think that it's always tricky to try to compare the different suffering, you know. Suffering in Libya, it's not bigger or smaller than COVID-19 or Syria or whatever. Fabio, do you have a proper training about individual productivity? So the proper train I did about, I think I imagine it was about this protective equipment. I mean, not for working in conflict zone, because it's different. Working conflict zone, I did the training. There is training, and I was also organizing. There is training in Italy, and this was for working in conflict zone. For working on COVID-19, I was lucky to have my mother, that is a doctor, and several of her friends are doctors, so this was the first approach. And after that, as I said before, with the Red Cross, they trained me to how to wear and use the protective measures equipment. And it was also interesting at that point because there were not a lot of photographers working inside of hospital or houses that time. We are talking about March 2020. So we also did like a protocol and also with the paper after a protocol to how to work in this conflict environment. I mean, and yeah, and I think this was also useful for other people and photographers and journalists that get more information to how to protect themselves about against COVID-19. Well, another question is, I mean, something that it's something that the newspaper it's commissioning you or the story takes care of your safety, or it is something that you need to do by yourself if you want to. Yeah. Is it that mandatory? I think it's mandatory for you. I mean, covering your safety, taking care of your safety is the most important thing that you can do. So knowing how to approach a story is important. If you're working as freelance, this is basically depends on you. if you're working on an assignment for a big newspaper, there is a protocol that you have to follow, and they help you to follow these measures. Help you means that working for the time, they send me several time protective measures when there was not chance to find around, talking about mask, FFP2, 3, gloves, protective suite, and they send me for working in these places. Okay.
Yeah, for now that's all for questions that I can see.
Yeah. So if there are no more questions, I think it's fine. I've been talking deeply about my work on COVID-19. I can suggest you to go to Coimbra because Luis and all the team did an amazing job in printing exhibition in the place where the exhibition is exposed. So if you have the chance, let's go there also for seeing other exhibitions that are also great.
Okay, so I think there's no more questions. So I think, yes. Thank you, Fabio.
Thank you.
You want to talk about, there's a...
Just the last question, the last second. Okay. That's an interesting question, Teresa. I think that it's not about not showing the suffering, the pain of others, but about how to show it. Because if the pain of their suffering, I think it's important that we know. So journalists and photographer, I think that are important, video maker, are important that they help us to understand better the reality, showing the reality. So it's not about showing or not showing, but it's about how you show. So, and where you show, this is a crucial point because you can show the pain in several ways. And if you are touched by the pain, you can feel the empathy with your subject. You are into the story. Probably you can find a way visually to talk about that pain to other people. Because if there are refugees, important that we keep talking about the refugees. And if there are conflict, it's also important that we are keep going to document what conflict are. I hope I answer you, Teresa. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for attending. And if you don't want to talk about anything else, I think we can close.
For me, it's fine. We can organize later talk with on other issues about conflict, about photojournalism itself, but about COVID-19. I think I
Okay.
said more or less everything about my approach and my work during the last time.
Okay. So thank you, Fabio.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, and have a good day. Thank you, Nuno.
Okay,
Thank you.
you too. Thank you. Bye.
Ciao.